In part 1 we looked at the Hurricane 3 and Neo's physical appearance and properties. In part 3 we'll be comparing what 4 of our league members thought about these rubbers when they actually used them. However, in the second part of the video series we're going to be looking at the Hurricane 3 and Neo's rebound speed, throw height, reaction to incoming spin, and also a quick test of what they were like to generate spin with. In all the robot tests I used the TT Matic 500 robot to fire balls at the blade, which I'd clamped vertically in a suction vise at the end of the table. The blade was then turned round and the same test repeated for the other rubber. Speed test. By choosing comparative footage of each rubber showing the ball travelling at a similar speed and trajectory from the robot to the blade, and then passing through the typical flight path of each rubber, I laid the video for the Neo on top of the Hurricane 3 and slowed the footage down to 50%. The flight of each ball was then tracked as they passed back over the net to see which one would reach the end of the table first. The ball bouncing off the Neo was marginally quicker to the net and went on to reach the end of the table noticeably quicker than the ball from the Hurricane 3. Combined with the fact that the ball fell further away from the bat with the Neo than with the Hurricane 3, and our test results show that the Neo has the faster rebound speed in terms of distance travelled between 2 points in a horizontal line. Rebound throw height, max speed, minimum spin. Based on the results from our first video, I was intrigued to see how much difference there would be between what DHS described as the Neo's powerful sponge and the traditional harder Hurricane 3 sponge. For this test, the TT Matic was set to maximum speed and minimum spin. After the ball had rebounded off the rubber, I marked the point at which the ball reached its apex, and again when it reached the netting at the end of the table. This would allow me to plot an average range for the maximum height the ball reached and the height of the ball by the time it hit the netting at the end of the table. Not all the footage I shot is shown here, but these results are typical of what I found, and even allowing for variations in the speed and throw of the ball from the robot, a clear pattern developed. The Neo's typical maximum height was just a little higher than the Hurricane 3 and was reached further away from the bat. By the time the ball hit the net, although both balls were falling, the difference in height was more marked, with the balls from the Neo being noticeably higher than those from the Hurricane 3. In addition, the grouping of the balls seemed to be tighter with the Neo, which may suggest the bounce off the Neo is a little more consistent than the Hurricane 3. Although to confirm this, much more testing would need to be done. Throw height. TT Matic set to average speed, minimum spin. Like the fast speed test, there was little difference in the maximum height the ball reached, but by the time the balls landed on the table, those from the Neo appeared to have consistently travelled further. Obviously, any difference in the throw angle will be exaggerated the further away from the bat the ball travels. But the Neo definitely seems to have good consistency in its groupings, and the ball seems to maintain its power longer. Reaction to incoming spin. Due to the problems I had getting consistency in this test, it was hard for me to compare the two rubbers, other than to say that both appeared to react similarly to the incoming side and bottom spin placed on the ball by the robot. Generating spin. A rubber's ability to generate spin can be compromised by a player's technique, so for this next test I could only conduct a comparative test on how easy I found it to generate spin on the Neo and the Hurricane 3, and please note these are not serves. I usually use mechanical grip rubbers with a sponge hardness over 40 degrees, and although these both rubbers are tacky, I found I was able to generate what for me was a good amount of spin using either rubber. However, of the two I was able to generate more spin with the Hurricane 3, although I did prefer the softer feel of the Hurricane 3 Neo when actually playing the shots. Conclusions. When considering our results, you have to bear in mind that these are not scientific tests carried out in a laboratory which would have guaranteed more consistency and better control of the results. However, what we can say is, at high speeds, the Neo has a slightly higher throw height, but the arc on the ball is less pronounced than with the Hurricane 3. At lower speeds, the difference in throw height is less noticeable, but the Neo is still just a bit higher and the ball travels a bit further. It also seems to be a little bit more consistent. Both rubbers reacted similarly to incoming spin, and I found both to be good at generating spin, with the Hurricane 3 just having the edge in terms of the amount of spin I was able to generate, although I preferred the feel of the Neo. But what does all this mean in reality? In part 3 of the video series, we'll look at what 4 of our experienced members of our league thought about these rubbers when they actually played with them, in terms of playing shots and compared to the rubbers they use at the moment. Thank you for watching.